Transhumanism was supposed to be the rejection of death. That was the core promise. Not just to extend life, but to do it with dignity. To use science and reason to break the biological chains that bound us to decay, to suffering, to time itself. It was never just about living longer. It was about living better and ensuring that future generations could live better too. But the movement has rotted. Not entirely, not everywhere, but at its loudest, most well-funded extremes, it's become something else, something darker. The philosophy that was meant to defy extinction has been hijacked by those actively accelerating it. Let's be precise. Transhumanism as a term refers to the belief that humans can and should use science and technology to transcend our biological limitations. It's not a monolith. At its best, it's a framework for serious long-term ethical inquiry into how we survive and flourish as a species. But at its worst, it's become a vehicle for delusional technocrats, authoritarian eugenicists, and escapist billionaires who've confused their own fear of mortality with visionary thinking. And they're not just wrong, they're dangerous, because they've replaced hope with control, reason with domination, and solidarity with abandonment. This shift didn't happen overnight. It happened because the movement forgot its roots. The real roots of transhumanism are Enlightenment roots. The Enlightenment wasn't just a cultural movement. It was a revolt against arbitrary power, mysticism, and the idea that your place in the world was fixed by birth. It declared that reason, evidence, and universal dignity should be the organizing principles of civilization. It said knowledge is power, and power should be accountable to truth. Enlightenment socialism extends that lineage. It says liberty is meaningless without material conditions to support it. That freedom requires access, that survival must be democratic. Now, contrast that with where transhumanism is going. You see venture capitalists chasing after artificial general intelligence while gutting labor protections. You see crypto billionaires funding anti-democratic charter cities while fantasizing about uploading their consciousness to escape climate collapse. You see self-identified extropians defending authoritarian regimes, celebrating inequality, and dismissing entire populations as evolutionary dead weight. That's not life-affirming. That's nihilism. A death cult is any belief system that glorifies control, hierarchy, and fatalism over justice, cooperation, and repair. And that's what much of the elite transhumanism has become. It preaches survival, but only for the powerful. It talks about decentralization, but only to avoid accountability. It fetishizes collapse as inevitable and frames indifference as maturity. And in doing so, it becomes part of the great filter it was supposed to help us escape. The great filter is a real concept in existential risk theory. It refers to the idea that somewhere between the emergence of life and the development of a spacefaring, sustainable civilization, there's a barrier that most species never cross. We don't know what it is. It might be nuclear war, ecological collapse, uncontrolled AI, or civilizational apathy. The point is, it's a test of wisdom that we haven't passed yet, and everything we do right now either brings us closer to surviving it or accelerates our failure. The original promise of transhumanism was to help us survive it, to build a future that was not just technologically advanced, but structurally resilient, ethically grounded, ecologically stable, socially cohesive. A future designed to last. But that requires more than inventing tools. It requires wisdom, restraint, planning, systems that reward cooperation over extraction, that protect the vulnerable instead of optimizing them out of existence, that build solidarity, not bunkers. Enlightenment socialism starts from first principles. It asks, what does liberty mean in a world shaped by exponential technology? What does equality mean in a system where access to enhancement determines your capacity to compete? What does solidarity mean when some people want to leave the planet and others can't afford clean water? These are not abstract questions. They're survival questions. Because if your version of the future only works for the rich, the white, the male, or the connected, it's not the future. It's a digital aristocracy with better branding. A just future requires infrastructure, not just physical infrastructure, housing, food, healthcare, but moral and philosophical infrastructure, the kind that prevents entire ideologies from collapsing into nihilism the moment power is challenged, the kind that can resist authoritarianism, the kind that understands that life extension without justice is not liberation. It's tyranny at scale. The irony is that the people who've hijacked transhumanism think they're the ones being realistic. They say collapse is inevitable, so why fight it? They say democracy is inefficient, so why preserve it? They say most people are too stupid to understand the stakes, so why share power? But this isn't realism, it's surrender. They've made peace with extinction. They've stopped believing humanity is worth saving unless it looks like them. That's the real suicide of the future. Not a meteor, not a robot uprising, but the quiet, calculated decision to abandon meaning, to let go of care, to aesthetize decay, and sell it as maturity. This is what happens when a movement forgets that intelligence without conscience is just automation, that progress without purpose is drift, that longevity without justice is just more oppression. So if transhumanism is to be redeemed, if it's to matter, it must return to its Enlightenment roots. It must be yoked to liberty, equality, solidarity, and truth, not just as values, but as design constraints. It must serve the species, not the market. It must scale compassion, not just computation. And it must see humanity not as raw material for optimization, but as something worth preserving on its own terms. We don't get to bypass the filter by running from it. We don't get to transcend the species by abandoning it. We either build a future that works for everyone, or we don't get one. That's the line. That's the choice. And if we fail, it won't be because we lacked the tools. It will be because the people who had them chose control over care, extraction over repair, survival for the few over liberation for the many. That's not transhumanism. That's entropy. And we were supposed to fight that.